For many people, Father's Day means laughter, warm embraces, and shared memories. But for the Tobin family, June 19, 2022 became the day they lost everything. What should have been a celebration turned into heartbreak. It all began just after 4:40 p.m. on a peaceful Sunday afternoon in Louisville's Taylorberry neighborhood, when Tremont Tobin stepped onto a porch and into a moment that would alter his family's life forever. It was supposed to be a short visit. The man inside the house? He wasn't a stranger. He was known, familiar, maybe even trusted. His name was Gregory Bell, a man some referred to as a family friend. Tremont had no reason to expect danger, no reason to think he'd never return home. Yet within seconds their quiet exchange turned deadly, and it would all be recorded. This wasn't an incident that happened in shadows. It didn't unfold in some hidden alley or forgotten part of town. It happened in the open on a front porch, with the sun still hanging in the sky and neighbors just steps away. What should have been a peaceful Father's Day turned into the last day of someone's life. And all of it began here. Before we go further, if you're new here, please tap that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support helps us share these stories with care and truth. Let's get back to what happened next. Earlier that afternoon, families across Louisville were settling in for Father's Day celebration. Children gave handmade cards. Grandparents sat in plastic lawn chairs under shady trees. The streets in Taylorberry, usually quiet, buzzed with Sunday calm. But not everything was calm inside the house where Tremont was heading. He arrived at the door of Gregory Bell. Whether their conversation began with small talk or something heavier, we may never fully know. But what we do know is this: there was no shouting, no warning. The doorbell camera captured it all. 1 minute, Tremont was standing, maybe even relaxed. The next, Bell pulled it and fired. Again and again. No fight. No threats from Tremont. Just and then silence. In the moments after, Bell didn't panic. He didn't run. He calmly wiped the weapon clean, bent down, and placed it beside Tremont's body, as if staging a scene, as if trying to change what really happened. A neighbor heard the shots. Then another. By the time help arrived, it was already too late. Tremont was gone before he could even make it to the hospital. On what should have been a day of joy, a mother lost her son, children lost their father, and 9 grandchildren were left without the man they called Pawpaw. The front porch where Tremont fell became the beginning of a long and painful road for his family. But this wasn't just about grief. What followed exposed lies, cover-ups, and a fight for justice that would take over 2 years to resolve. And it all began with a man who said he was a friend pulling a trigger with no clear reason. This story reminds me of another case we shared on this channel just last week about a woman who harmed her partner during a live stream, with no clear explanation. If you haven't seen that video yet, you can find the link in the description box below. Now let's return to the story of Tremont. Tremont Lee Tobin was not famous in the spotlight, but to his children and grandchildren, he was a hero. He was dependable, honest, the kind of person everyone could count on. He was known for showing up, for doing the hard things, the quiet things. Things no one else wanted to do. Things most people never saw. He ran a small business, Tobin's Cleaning and Hauling Services, which he built from scratch alongside his nephew, Kentrell Ankrum. It wasn't a big-time company. There were no office towers, no suits. Just honest work, day by day. Truckloads of trash cleared out from yards, basements, old homes. Heavy lifting. Dust in the eyes. Sweat down his back. That's the kind of man Tremont was. And when the day's work ended, he didn't go looking for trouble. He went home. To his kids. To his grandchildren. To the life he had worked so hard to build. 9 grandchildren. That's how many small hands reached for his. That's how many tiny voices called him Pawpaw. And his children? They looked up to him. Not because he had power, but because he had peace. He brought calm. He didn't abandon them. He stuck around. That was Tremont. That's the man who was taken. Now here's where it cuts deep. Gregory Bell, the man responsible for the act, wasn't a stranger. He wasn't a masked face in the dark. He wasn't some figure from across town. He was known. He had been around the family. He was considered a family friend. Someone who had shared meals, stories, and time. He and Tremont had history. Not a close, daily friendship, but they had familiarity. Enough for Tremont to walk up to his house. Enough for him to stand on that porch without fear. That makes what happened even harder to explain. Even harder to believe. Because when someone you trust turns on you, there's no way to prepare for it. What happened wasn't just a tragedy, it felt like betrayal. Tremont wasn't in the wrong place. He wasn't out looking for a fight. He was exactly where he thought he could be, on the porch of a man he knew. No weapons. No threats. Just a visit that turned into the end of his story. The people who loved him still don't understand it. How someone familiar could change everything in an instant. But the footage didn't lie. And the pain his family now carries? That's a wound that doesn't fade. Tremont Tobin's life wasn't loud, but it mattered. To his children, to his grandkids, to his coworkers, and to anyone who ever needed someone they could count on. What was taken that day wasn't just a person. It was presence. It was laughter in the hallway. It was a chair left empty at every family gathering that followed. And it all ended on a porch where Tremont believed he was safe. After the incident, it didn't take long for the first responders to arrive. The house sat in a residential block, just a short drive from local fire and medical units. But even speed wasn't enough that day. Tremont had sustained multiple injuries serious enough to leave him struggling to hold on. Paramedics did what they could. They worked quickly, pressing wounds, lifting him onto the stretcher, pushing toward the ambulance. His pulse was faint, his breathing shallow. There was hope for a second. Maybe he'd make it. Maybe it wasn't too late. But the ride to the hospital didn't last long. By the time they reached the emergency bay, Tremont Tobin was already gone. News didn't travel slowly. It never does when someone like Tremont is taken. Family members heard before the sun even set. Calls came in. Voices cracked. One by one, they tried to make sense of something that made no sense at all. Back at the scene, police questioned the man inside the house, Gregory Bell. His story? Self-defense. He told officers that Tremont was threatening him, that he feared for his life, that pulling the trigger was his only option. But the doorbell camera said otherwise. Footage showed Tremont standing calmly, no weapon, no aggressive moves. No yelling. No push. No punch. Just a man having a conversation until it turned fatal in an instant. And what Bell did next? That told its own story. He didn't call 911. He didn't run for help. Instead, he walked over to Tremont's body and handled the weapon carefully, removing any trace and placing it beside Tremont. Then he carefully placed the weapon near Tremont, as if trying to make it look like something it wasn't. A setup. A cover. A quiet act with loud meaning. By the time officers reviewed the footage, his story had already started to fall apart. The evidence didn't match the words. And yet somehow he still tried to claim innocence. He said he was scared. He said he was protecting himself. But the footage showed a man in control. A man who planned his next step, not panicked. A man who didn't fire in fear but in cold, deliberate motion. And as investigators combed through his background, more truth surfaced. Gregory Bell wasn't just any man. He had a record. A convicted felon. Someone who shouldn't have even had a firearm in the first place. And yet he had one. While Tremont's family made funeral arrangements, Bell sat in silence, under arrest, the pieces of his story unraveling by the hour. What was taken from that porch wasn't just a life. It was trust. It was safety. It was the idea that people like Tremont, people who work hard, love deeply, and hurt no one, can live without becoming targets. And all the while, a mother named Karen Sears was just beginning to understand the size of the hole left behind. Gregory Bell was taken into custody shortly after the incident. The evidence was clear, and the video footage left little room for doubt. Authorities didn't have to search far for answers. It was all recorded by the doorbell camera at the front of the home. The recording showed everything. Tremont standing still, calm. No aggression. No object in hand. Then Bell making a sudden move. Then the moment everything changed. And afterward, rather than calling for assistance or checking if Tremont was okay, Bell handled the item involved, removed his fingerprints and placed it near Tremont, attempting to shape the scene. He didn't attempt to help. He didn't reach out to emergency responders. Instead, he altered the setting and waited. But what he couldn't undo was the video. That recording didn't just show what happened, it suggested intention. Within days, formal charges were filed. Taking of a life. Altering physical evidence. Possessing a restricted item as someone with a previous conviction. The legal process was slow. Months passed. Court appearances were delayed. Documents filed. Yet throughout it all, Tremont's family remained present, heartbroken, exhausted, but committed to seeing it through. Bell's side continued to argue self-protection. But the footage presented a very different picture. It was unedited, quiet, and clear. In October 2024, Gregory Bell stood in court and entered a plea of responsibility. No more claims. No more shifts in story. He acknowledged his actions. That day, the courtroom was filled. Friends, neighbors, and family who had loved Tremont came to hear how accountability would be delivered. The outcome, 25 years of confinement. Yet for a grieving family, it didn't feel like enough, not when the person they lost could never return. At the hearing, Tremont's mother, Karen Sears, stood up to speak. Her voice was steady. Her message clear. "I have to go to the cemetery on our birthday just to wish my baby a happy birthday. I will never accept your apology." She wasn't just addressing the judge, she was speaking directly to the man who changed everything. Other loved ones described Tremont as a steady figure, a caregiver, a person who always showed up. One of his daughters shared through tears how her father had been her foundation and how her children still ask about the grandfather who made them laugh and brought them joy. There were no cheers. No sense of closure. Just a decision. And the painful truth that no sentence served could equal the time they had lost. Gregory Bell was led away. Quiet, no statements. But for Tremont's family, what they truly wanted was never going to return. It's hard to measure a man's life by the number of years he lived. It's even harder when that life ends not because of time or illness, but because of the actions of someone he once trusted. Tremont Tobin wasn't wealthy. He didn't have trophies on a shelf or millions of followers. But he left behind something far more lasting: love, respect, and presence. That kind of legacy doesn't fade from memory. It stays alive in the hearts of those who remember how he made them feel. His mother, Karen Sears, still holds onto his photo. On special days, birthdays, Father's Day, she visits his resting place just to feel close to her son. She shouldn't have to. No mother should need to stand at a headstone to say things she was meant to say face to face. What happened that day on the porch didn't just mean the end of one person's life. It took away a father's embrace, a grandfather's guidance, a friend's steady support. And the most heartbreaking part? It didn't need to happen. Gregory Bell didn't react out of fear. His actions showed control. He had a prior record and was not permitted to possess any form of restricted item. Yet he had one. And his choice that day left a family forever changed. Now he is serving a sentence. But the people who cared about Tremont are the ones who continue to live with the loss. So what can we take from all of this? Maybe it's a reminder to cherish those in our lives who show up quietly and consistently, not for applause, not for attention, but simply because they care. The ones who keep their promises. The ones who offer love without asking for anything in return. Tremont Tobin was that kind of person. And if someone like him can be taken from the world so suddenly, so unfairly, then perhaps we all need to pay closer attention to who we trust, to the way we care for each other, and to the moments we might overlook. Because loss doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from familiar faces. And when someone like Tremont is no longer here, the emptiness they leave behind is hard to describe. If this story touched you even for a moment, please take one simple step. Subscribe to this channel. We share stories that matter. Stories that remind us of the value of life. Your support helps us continue to honor those who deserve to be remembered. And if you've ever experienced the kind of loss that felt unfair, you're not alone. We see you, we hear you, and we remember together.